So a few years ago, I wrote a book on how to set up mandolins, and mandolins are very, very finicky, fussy instruments because of the short neck length and the high tension on the strings. Um, but writing that book, I did a lot of research, and a lot of the techniques and skills translate directly to the guitar. One of the most important things is you need to buy a set of feeler gauges if you don't already have them. These are feeler gauges that you get at any auto parts store. I picked these up at the local Napa. And the thing to do is you take these feeler gauges, we're going to use them to measure string heights off the frets later on. But right now, a very cool little trick that I developed, I don't know, I read people doing similar things with other kinds of gauges, is you take them out of the box, and they typically come all together. Let me grab them here. So you take them all like this, lay them on a nice flat surface. Take a little needle file that has a good edge on it, and score across, there you go, score across them a couple of different times. And then you can see, there we go, I've just put two little notches in each of my feeler gauges. So the important thing is when you're setting up the neck, which is what we're going to be doing, two necks, obviously, for a guitar. When these come straight from the factory, these nut slots are set up so they're perfectly straight. There's just a tiny little cut in there. Now, we're not going to cut through enough to actually lower these until the guitar is put together and we've got the strings on it. But what we are going to do is we're going to cut down at about a 45-degree angle, 35 to 45-degree angle, so that the string breaks evenly right at the edge of the nut. What we don't want is for the string to actually make contact or break farther up on the nut. Otherwise, the intonation is never going to be accurate. So the key there is take your set of strings, lay them out so you know exactly what the measurements are. And so, for example, the high E string is a 9mm size string. I don't have a 9mm feeler gauge. I have a 10. So what I do is I take my 10mm gauge and I run it through that nut slot. And by the way, if you're a guitarist and if you've got any strings that when you're tuning them, they don't change, you're tuning the tuning peg, they don't change, and then they make a little squeaking sound and suddenly they've jumped up a significant pitch. Generally speaking, that means that your slot, the nut slot, is too tight for the string that you've got. So again, take your feeler gauges out, just make it a little bit bigger, and then you can put a little graphite in there if you want to lubricate the nut slot, but that's how you take care of that. So I already did that on the 6-string neck, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my set of 12-string strings so I can cut the nut slots at a 45-degree angle, and I've got a dozen of them to do. So you don't need to watch me do it because it's kind of boring, but that's what we're going to take care of next. So now that I've got my nut slots all cut in the right direction at the right angle, going back there, I'm going to be thinking about putting a pattern on the top of the headstock and making a cut to make it look prettier. But you can see, as I mentioned before, I have oiled the rosewood fretboards and they look super great right now. And I also used the truss rod adjustment to straighten out the neck. So later on, once I've got the strings on, we'll be checking the neck, seeing if I've got any high frets that I need to address. Right now it feels pretty good, but you never know until you get the strings on and you start playing the guitar whether you've got any fret issues that need to be addressed. So anyhow, at this point of the build, we've got the neck ready for the next steps. When I started mounting the neck and drilled the holes to put the mounting plates in, unfortunately I found out that even with the bolt-ons being as close to the neck as possible, the lower screws were protruding down into the rout cavities, which was going to interfere with the pickups and would not work. So I had to come up with a solution to that, as you are going to see. My solution was to put a hole in the center of the plastic mounting plate and put a small drywall screw there and have it flush against the plastic. And then in a minute I'll show you what the finished plate is going to look like. Alright, so here they are now properly mounted. I'm going to fill all four of the remaining holes with plastic wood. And then I'm either going to find a replacement for these screws that's extremely short so they don't go through into the route cavities, or I will cut those screws off and glue them on so that it looks proper when it's all said and done.
The top of the headstock was pretty boring, so I traced a whale tail outline in each of the necks, and then I used a drill to prep it so I could then cut the neck out, or cut the top out, and then sand it down, and you'll see I end up with a nice looking whale tail.
Alright, so I've just put in all the tuning pegs. I think I mentioned before that the tuning pegs, and remember there are 12 and 6 is 18 of them. The tuning pegs only came with one screw each, and I'm going to show you a picture of them, but they clearly require two screws each. So what I did was I went to Home Depot, the local hardware store, and picked up 3 8-packs, which is 24. 12 times 2 is 24 screws. Then I used the extras from the other ones to give the 6 tuning pegs 2 screws each. So they look good. There's a nice little cutout of the whale tail that I've cut into the headstock that I think is going to look pretty cool when I get it all sanded down and painted. So as I mentioned before, I still have to address the extra 2 screw holes here, but I'll be taking care of that. I'm not really worried about it. In the scheme of things, it's pretty easy. So the neck is looking really good right now.